one.
Hello, South Africa, and welcome to my first town hall since my election as the leader of the Democratic Alliance. This is going to be an ongoing engagement with members of the public in South Africa, where you'll be able to interact with me directly, ask me questions, and discuss a wide range of issues. But before we begin, I would ask you to join me in a moment of silence as we mark Remembrance Day, the 11th hour of the 11th month, in honor and memory of all of those who have lost their lives due to war and strife around the world. Please join me. Thank you very much. At 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the guns eventually fell silent on the Western Front, and the carnage that was World War I came to an end. The poppy that I'm wearing today is a symbol, an international symbol of peace and remembrance, and the 11th of November now marks a day of remembrance for all of those who've lost their lives, including the many thousands of South African servicemen and women who spent and paid the ultimate sacrifice fighting for freedom in wars. We remember the people of the SS Mendi. We remember the South Africans at Tobruk. We remember the people of Delver Wood who lost their lives. And in acknowledging this today, we will always remember them. But I think it's also to remember that the fight for freedom is never actually finally won, and it falls to each generation to keep that fight going and ensure that freedom, as we know it, continues to exist. There are a number of by-elections taking place around the country today, and I would really urge you, if you're in one of those areas where we are having a by-election, to make sure that you get out there and vote. Please do not think that your vote does not make a difference. Every vote counts, and particularly at a local government municipal by-election, your vote could be the difference between having a DA councillor or having your councillor from another party. It could also mean the difference between having a DA government where you are and the municipal council falling into the hands of somebody completely different. So please make sure, if you are living in one of those areas where there is a by-election, to take your green barcoded ID book or your ID card, smart card, to the station where you're registered to vote. If you're unsure, you can SMS your ID number to 32810, and that will tell you exactly where you're registered to vote. The DA is counting on you to get out there today and make sure we get those votes in the box. Please don't waste your vote on smaller parties, particularly in tight races. Only the DA is big enough to take on the ANC and the EFF and to start to build a new majority. That fight starts at the local government elections next year, but for many of you, it has already started with this interaction today of these by-elections. You can also go to our website, www.da.org.za, for any assistance in by-election related queries. So it's been a really busy few days since the Congress, and it was a whirlwind. As many of you now know, I've received a significant mandate from the DA, which has given me an opportunity to really set the party onto a path towards victory in as many municipalities as possible in the local government elections next year, to get as many councillors across the finish line as possible, and to win control in those councils so that we can start to bring the DA difference to your town, to your community. And I would urge you to watch the DA over the next year as we set out very clearly our offer for hope and change. We want to move the country towards a new horizon of hope. We want to show South Africans that life can be different, that you can have the dignity of a home, that you can live in a safe community, that you can have a municipality that works for you and provides decent basic services, that's creating an environment where jobs are created. And you can have that and so much more, but it all comes down to how you vote. There are millions of South Africans who are daily living under DA administrations and are feeling the DA difference every single day in their the way they live and the way in which they interact with their municipality. We want to bring that change to your community. We want to bring that change to your town. we want to bring that change to your city. So if you're not registered to vote, there are hundreds of thousands of South Africans who are just simply not registered to vote. We can't sit and complain around how bad things are in our town, our city, or our province or country around dinner tables or bribe places or shis and yamas. We've got to actually get our hands dirty and get stuck in terms of rescuing South Africa. South Africa needs you now more than ever before. We're about to go into a very difficult period economically, as well as many South Africans have already started to feel the bite during the government's lockdown. Business is in a tight spot, our economy is not growing, and it's very clear that the president is going to really struggle to get through any of the deep reforms that are required to get our economy growing, get people out of poverty and into opportunity. And so it's going to fall to the DA to be able to do that. Make sure you are registered to vote so that you can become part of the solution rather than talking about the problem. I've had a number of the questions that have come through today, but I've been really excited to be out on the ground. Virtually immediately after the Congress victory, I set off for the battlegrounds of Johannesburg, where I got to interact with DA public representatives, communities in places like Lenasia and other parts of Johannesburg, talking about the type of party we want to build, the type of communities we want to build. Then I went off to George, where I've spent time yesterday in all 4 wards where we're contesting by-elections. There's a real opportunity for us to do well there. And I'm wishing all DA public reps who are out there on the campaign trail, working in by-elections today, good luck. Let's get out there and make sure it happens. So let's get on to the first set of questions that have come through from you. Please keep the questions coming through. Remember, this is all about our engagement with you. You get an opportunity to ask your politicians, the people that you elect, the people you give a mandate to, questions that are on your heart and on your mind. And we're going to do our very best to make sure we get through as many of them, but also that we answer them in a way that gives you the information that you're looking for. So the first one, I think, comes from Lee Hale, and I think that it is quite a topical one. And that is, what is my view on the scenes outside Brackenfell High in the Western Cape on Monday? Let me start off by saying that violence is never going to be the solution to any of the problems facing South Africa. Violence just begets other violence, and we then end up in a self-destructive cycle where we adopt the approach of an eye for an eye. And as Martin Luther King famously said, if we adopt that approach of an eye for an eye, the whole world will be blind. What we've got to be doing is bringing people together, but we've also got to make sure that we uphold the rule of law in South Africa. The rule of law is one of the foundational principles that underpins a constitutional democracy. You cannot have lawlessness. You cannot have people going around threatening other people on the basis of the color of their skin, about who they are, what they get up to in their private time. And I think it's really unfortunate the way in which the EFF have become a force that goes around terrorizing South Africans, whether it's trashing H&M, whether it's destroying clicks and the jobs with them, whether it's trashing Vodacom stores. This is not going to take the country forward. We need to find each other and we need to come together, or we're going to come apart as a country. This country is going to sink or swim by what we do as South Africans. If we're busy fighting each other, there's no time left to then fight for the future of our country. And so at the heart of the DA that I want to lead is a party that sets out every single day to bind the wounds of the past, to bring South Africans together around a common set of values and principles that are going to take this country forward. We need to do this. We need to do it urgently. The more we fight amongst each other, the more divisions there are, the more we have populist politicians in red going out there to pit South Africans against each other, the worse our problems are going to be. We've shown time and time again, whenever we face difficulty as a country, that it is only when we come together that we can overcome the challenges that we face. We've got a steep hill to climb ahead of us, and it's going to require the best efforts of every one of us, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of where we live, regardless of what language you speak or God we worship or who we love. We've got to start coming together to build a new majority in South Africa that's going to keep the radical elements that want to continually divide us as South Africans on arbitrary things like race, language, etc. And we need to make sure that we stand up and say, no, we are better together, and we want to be part of the solution going forward. So thank you, Lee, for that. Sue asks a very good question. Thank you, Sue. I've read about the DA adopting a policy of non-racialism. What does this mean practically about how you will approach solutions to all of South Africa's problems? Let me be very clear, Sue. There are some in the commentariat and others that are going around peddling this myth that the DA is saying that race does not matter. Sue, nothing could be further from the truth. Race matters in South Africa, and race matters particularly because for almost a century, race was used as the means to deprive people of economic opportunity, ownership of property, the ability to pass property and valuable goods on to other family members, where people could live, what type of jobs people could have, who people could associate with, who they could love. And it was precisely those divisions based on race that have landed South Africa up in the problem that we face today, where we remain one of the most unequal societies in the world, and where the gap between rich and poor, rather than narrowing, is growing wider every single year. We now have over 30 million South Africans who live below 992 Rand per month. In other words, 30 million South Africans trapped in poverty. Just think about that for a second. 30 million of our countrymen and women who are making ends meet on 992 Rand a month. Those people need our help now more than ever before. And it's those people who our policies target quite specifically. We've seen as well that the race-based policies of BBBEE, the ANC's version of redress, have made no real impact. Unemployment queues grown wider and longer. Black South African households are poorer now than they were 10 years ago. And it has not addressed inequality. Instead, it has made a very small group of people exceptionally wealthy. These are the people we see on the news who can go out and buy 5 Porsche Cayennes in a single day, while many of the 30 million live in absolute squalor, unable to provide even food for their families or to clothe their children. That cannot be right. What we want is a redress system in South Africa that focuses on justice and focuses our policies on where they are needed the most, where people need the help the most. Patrice Motsepe doesn't need the help of government. Many of these other BEE billionaires and millionaires are already empowered. They don't need more help from government. The people who need us now more than ever before are the 30 million South Africans living in poverty. 99.7% of them are black South Africans, precisely because they were the specific targeted victims of race-based policies before. Now, just like you don't fix a gunshot wound by shooting somebody again, you don't fix race-based policies by layering over more race-based policies. What we need to do is find a completely new paradigm that focuses our attention on ensuring that when we have empowerment programs, they are focused specifically on the 30 million South Africans living below 992 Rand a month. And just like with NSFAS, just like with the SASSA grant, just like with housing allocations, it shouldn't matter what color those people are, provided they are be able to fall into that category of poor South Africans. They should qualify for the assistance. But if you focus your policies on that specific section, empowering those 30 million, 99.7% of the people that you're going to be helping are precisely black South Africans who have been locked out of opportunity and trapped in poverty and are continuously pushed further and further away from economic advancement by a small predator elite whose only interest is to absorb and keep as much of the money and resources of government in their hands, rather than smashing down this insider-outsider economy and letting more of the 30 million South Africans through the door into a future where they can provide for themselves and provide for their families. We need to move towards that future because we believe that's going to be genuine, broad-based empowerment that's going to make a real difference in tackling poverty. Shyam Ali writes here, I've heard unemployment in the Western Cape was the lowest in South Africa. How do you do it, and how will you help the rest of us unemployed in the rest of the country? Well, I believe, and I set out very clearly in my speech at the weekend, that part of the problem is that we've given far too much power to the state in South Africa. We need to give the people back the power that belongs to them. Because wherever you look, at every single stage, it is the state that is crowding out entrepreneurship. It is the state that is stifling business opportunities, whether it is through draconian labor legislation, whether it's through completely misdirected spending of the budget, whether it is the incapable state that cannot get businesses licensed, cannot get entrepreneurs assisted, etc. They are standing in the way of real progress and real jobs. And we've said very clearly, the state needs to get out of the way. Doesn't mean there isn't a role for the state. Of course there is a role for the state. The state's role is to create the enabling environment and infrastructure for private entrepreneurship and private enterprise to unleash the jobs revolution that this country needs so desperately. And if you want to see a good example of just how the incapable state and too much state power is crowding out opportunity in South Africa, let's just look at one case, just one case, and that's South African Airways. Here you've got a government that says they're pro-poor, that says they want to create jobs, and yet is about to commit 16 billion rand of public money into a failed airline. The majority of those 30 million South Africans who live in poverty, the closest they will ever come to South African Airways is when a plane flies over their informal settlement or low-cost housing development. And here we're about to spend 16 billion rand to keep that plane in the sky so that the wealthy 5% can get around the country. That can't be right in a country with such deep inequality as we exist in South Africa today. So if you're serious about job creation, what would I do with that 16 billion rand? Well, first of all, I'd shut down South African Airways so we stop having to pour more money into it every year. And I'd take that 16 billion rand and build job centers, provide seed capital for young entrepreneurs who've got great ideas. South Africans are incredibly talented. South Africans are innovative. Imagine if we could use that 16 billion rand as startup capital for hundreds of thousands of small young entrepreneurs around the country. Pour it into providing more NSFAS funding so that children who want to be able to study further, to develop the skills our country needs to unleash economic growth, are able to do so. That's what a government that is pro-poor does. That's what a government that's pro-jobs does. What it doesn't do is keep taking billions and billions of rand that should be invested in the people of South Africa and keep investing it in the incapable state that has shown it simply cannot get things moving forward. We need a jobs revolution in South Africa. And I want to tell you, it's not going to be the 800,000 jobs announced by President Ramaphosa, which are essentially public sector wage jobs. They are EPWP jobs. Now, they have a place, but they aren't real jobs. And any one of you who've been on one of these programs knows that it's a couple of days a month of employment. It's not nearly a sustainable job that's going to be able to allow you to plan a better future for your family, to be able to make those additions to your home that you so desperately need to do, to be able to buy the materials that you need to expand your business. You need real jobs. And this party that I lead is determined to speak up for real jobs unleashed by private entrepreneurship in South Africa today. So, Shyam, at the heart of it lies building the capable state, taking power away from the state and giving it back to the people, and understanding this, that government doesn't create jobs. Business people create jobs. Private enterprise creates jobs. And we've got to focus on making sure we're providing all the support possible there. Drian Duplessis asked a good question. What are you doing regarding what's happening in the Western Cape with gangsters running around and killing innocent people? And Diane, that is an excellent question, because gangsterism linked to drugs is a terrible problem, and there is a problem in the Western Cape with it. And the frustration that the Western Cape government has, and I've chatted to Premier Windy and MEC Fritz on many occasions about this, is that policing is done at a national level. It is a national competence. The province's only role in policing is essentially oversight and accountability. We have some of the police stations in many of the most gang-ridden areas that have the worst police-to-population ratio internationally. never mind in South Africa. We believe that one of the ways to tackle gangsterism and drugs is through localized policing. We believe if policing was devolved down to provincial level, it would allow the provincial governments in each case to tailor-make the policing that would suit their environment better. International best practice has shown that the more you localize policing, the more effective that policing becomes in tackling crime and criminality. By way of example, the city of Cape Town, given the fact that national government has failed so spectacularly and that they're not prepared to provide the resources, has had to step in. So the Western Cape Gangs Unit, the City of Cape Town's gang units, and I've been privileged to go out on a number of occasions with those brave men and women to see the work that they're doing on the front line against gangsterism and drugs. And can you imagine if they had the full might of the SAPS behind them? But they're out there making a difference, and the more localized we can make policing, the more effective it is to tackle crime and criminality. So what Premier Alan Winier's team are doing are pushing the envelope, pushing for more policing powers to be devolved to the Western Cape, fighting for more resources. You can't tackle the scourge unless you have the resources. There's only so much the city can do. There's only so much the province can do in the current framework. We need to be able to devolve those powers down, take them away from Pretoria and give them to the Western Cape, to the City of Cape Town, to really take that fight to gangsterism and drugs here in the Western Cape. Elsa Joubert asks a good question, and I think it's one that's very topical lately with the scourge of farm attacks and farm murders and attacks in rural communities. And let me start off by saying this, that there is this notion out there, again amongst a misguided commentariat, that rural safety is an issue that affects white farmers only. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, within the same 24 hours of the brutal murder of that young farmer in the Free State who was tied up to a pole and left to die in the most terrible way, there was a young couple in Limpopo who were murdered, their throats were slit, and their 12-month-old baby left lying in their blood. Crime affects everybody. It doesn't know a color, and it doesn't know a class or a race. We have a problem with policing in rural areas. What happened is the government, many, many years ago, withdrew the commando system upon which the rural safety backbone was built, and then did not replace it with anything else. So what stepped into that vacuum of under-resourced areas, of under-resourced police stations, and vast tracts of land that need to be policed was crime and criminality. People know in those rural communities it'll take ages for police personnel to get to the scene of a crime, and therefore they conduct their heinous activity almost with impunity. I'm very proud of our DA party because we've been able to put on the table a rural safety plan that we think will really take the fight to the criminals in the rural areas. Greater resources, greater use of intelligence-driven operations. Obviously, when you've got large areas to patrol, the more you can focus on intelligence, the better it is. And a system that would use police reservists to fill the gap that the old commandos did, and at the same time provide employment in rural areas, particularly in this area of keeping our communities safe. Additionally, the use of technology. Drone technology is now at such an advanced stage that you could set drones to patrol large areas, particularly our borders where stock theft is so rife and is the main driving cause of many of the murders that we've seen. Being able to patrol very easily with the drone and then being able to pinpoint where problem areas are, and so you can direct scarcer resources directly to where those issues arise. Additionally, we've introduced an incredible program called the Court Watching Brief, which looks at making sure and keeping an eye on the SAPS and the NPA in terms of how cases progress through court. Many of these cases, even when they catch the perpetrators of these terrible farm attacks, get off because there's been sloppy work done on the docket. There's been a prosecuting authority that hasn't had the case headed in the right direction, hasn't got the evidence together. Our Court Watching Brief program is keeping a strong eye on these cases now, and we've had huge success in a case in the Eastern Cape, Free State, And we're rolling it out around the country, where we're going to make sure that when we do catch these criminals, that they face the full might of the law. Because that's what makes South Africans angry, is that when justice is not done, when people are caught and then they don't pay the price for their criminal activity. That has to stop. There has to be consequences in South Africa for murder, for rape, for gender-based violence, for farm attacks. We've also got to make sure that we're protecting our food security. Many of these rural communities are the breadbasket of our country. If we chase people from this land, if we make it impossible for them to live safely and in harmony, then it's going to dramatically affect South Africa's food security. And we'd have to import far more food, and that is going to put even more strain on an already constrained fiscus. I believe that we can find a solution. I don't believe that that solution is going to come from standing on the back of the bakkie with a megaphone, calling on people to draw arms and arm themselves and retreat into lagers. I think that solution for rural safety and addressing the rural crime problem is going to come from all of us coming together around a common plan to actually deal with it. Dividing the very people that should be sitting around the same table to resolve the problem is only going to make it so much more worse. We've got to make sure that we're coming together and we're solutions-oriented, and I've committed our party to being a partner with whatever organizations in this country who are truly committed to dealing with the scourge of rural safety. We will be around that table, putting our suggestions, our ideas on the table for discussion. So thank you very, very much. Asanda asks a light-hearted question. What's your favorite book you've read so far this year? I read an excellent book this year, probably my absolute favorite, Andrew Roberts' biography on Winston Churchill. And what an incredible read, and how absolutely apt at this time when South Africa finds itself confronting a war. Not a war from an invading force, but a war of poverty, malnutrition, suffering, and unemployment in South Africa. We're going to need the Churchillian grit as a nation if we're going to get through this problem. And so it's hugely inspiring to be able to see that no matter how tough the going was, people like Winston Churchill and so many others got up every day to fight for a better future. I'm committed to fighting for that horizon of hope in South Africa. And I took great succor from that book around what true grit is and about sticking to what you believe in and why that is so important to achieve your ultimate goals, and bringing resources and people together around that plan to be able to achieve the outcome. Hugely, hugely important. And I see there's a number of people coming through here with the usual old EFF lines. I see about, why am I not writing my matric exams? Well, the answer to that, Mr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, is that I finished matric in 1993, and I am certainly not going to plan on writing it again. I've got my matric certificate, and I'm looking forward to making sure that we go out there and dispel the notion. And I certainly, from what I've seen on social media, Mr. Ndlozi, I think my maths is slightly better than yours. Emmanuel Davids asks, what have you learned from the sometimes difficult road the DA has walked over the last 2 years, and how has that informed your vision for the party moving forward? I'm going to shoot straight with you, South Africa. The DA has come from a very difficult place. Last election was not the result that we wanted. We were expecting more, and we went backwards for the first time since 1994. Now, election results don't have to be fatal, provided you learn the lessons from them. And I think that you sent the DA a very clear message in the last election, that we were not being clear about who we were. We weren't standing up where we needed to be heard. And we weren't being consistent in the way in which we did things. We went through an internal review panel that was chaired by the former senior leaders of the party, and that review panel came up with some very definite areas where the party needed to improve, to be able to be more unambiguous about who we are as a party, what we're fighting for, what we want to achieve for South Africa. And I'm happy to say that we've spent the last 8 months making those changes, implementing that report. And in full transparency, that report was made publicly available so that you, the public, would be able to interrogate it and have a look at it. Even members of the public were invited to participate in the process. The result, I believe, is a stronger, more united DA that is more focused on the future than ever before. I think what the DA has been very good at over the last couple of years is being very critical of the ANC, walking into the ANC shop, telling customers in the ANC shop how bad the service is there, how terrible the fruit is, how they rip you off at the till, how they don't pay their taxes. I think what we've been able to demonstrate during the last 8 months, particularly using the Corona cost and initiatives like this, is to talk directly to South Africa about the DA. Not just criticizing our opponents, but setting out our own stall, our own policies, our own plans, our own vision for each and every one of you, whether you are living in an informal settlement in Shoshanguve or you're staying in Constantia. We've got a plan to make your life better. We want to build a better, more inclusive South Africa with a growing economy that is creating jobs and lifting people out of poverty and into opportunity. We want to be a voice for those 30 million South Africans who are living in poverty and who have no voice at the table. They're crowded out by insider interests, by union interests. The employed, the employers crowd them out. We need to make sure that their voice is being heard loud and clear in the corridors of Parliament, in the council chambers, and in the legislatures. I want our party to be out there proudly speaking about the future we can offer you, not shining a light to show you how deep the hole is, but rather shining a light to show you the way we're going to get you out of this hole, how we're going to get you onto a path to prosperity, how we're going to bring real meaningful change to your lives so that you can live a life of value. Masikola Ntloko from the Eastern Cape asks here, as a white male, do you believe you can truly represent all South Africans? Don't you believe the DA should be led by a black person? And this is an excellent question and one which we get asked a lot. I want to start off by saying that, yes, I am a white South African. I think that's pretty obvious to anybody watching here. And yes, no doubt, I did benefit from a system which systematically favored people on nothing other than the color of their skin. Now, I've got a choice. I can sit in a corner and bemoan that fact, or I can get up every single day to fight against the scourge of what we live with from those days still in South Africa and give every effort of my heart, my body, and my soul to being able to address those imbalances, to make right those wrongs, to ensure that we are fighting for the poor, that we are stopping this deep inequality that exists. And I don't believe that we are envoys of our race. I don't believe that we should be judged simply by the color of our skin. If we do that, we're going right back to the root of the problem that's caused all the suffering in South Africa, and that is ascribing values, stereotypes to people based on nothing other than the color of their skin. I think it's time to start looking as South Africans about what they can offer the country, what they're doing to get up every day to make our country a better place, to build a future, to move the country towards that horizon to hope. And I think that just like in a hospital, it doesn't matter what the color of the doctor attending to you, as long as they heal you. It's going to matter to many more South Africans. So I passionately believe that you don't have to be a poor black South African living in an informal settlement to be able to speak up and speak out for poor black South Africans living in informal settlements. Helen Suzman showed us beyond a doubt that you didn't have to be a black South African political prisoner on Robben Island to speak up and speak out and raise attention to the issues of those political prisoners on Robben Island. Indeed, she was a small Jewish woman from Houghton who happened to be white, and yet she was the loudest voice in Parliament for those people. I want to speak up and speak out for South Africans, regardless of what the color of their skin is, regardless of where they live, regardless of what God they worship. I want you to know that you've got a place in the DA. This is a home for all South Africans. We are the most diverse party in South Africa. If you look at the parties to both the left and the right of us, they're virtually monochromatic. And if you look at the DA benches, look at the DA leadership, you can see its diversity in all its spectacular technicolor. Jews sitting next to Muslims, Hindus with Christians, black and white, Indian and colored. They're not because they are envoys of their race, but because they are excellent South Africans, committed completely to building a better future for you and your family. That is the beauty of the DA. I believe that's where the future of South Africa lies, and that is building that new majority, bringing South Africans from different communities, different backgrounds together around a common set of objectives. Let's stop being obsessed about these ideologies. Let's get people around the table who passionately believe in the future of this country. I happen to be one of them. I believe passionately that the best days of our country still lie ahead of us. So let's go out actively and seek these people and bring them together. And they're good people in all parties, including the ANC. There's some really great people. I have colleagues I work with here in Parliament who are excellent South Africans who are committed to building a better future. I think it's time that we started to reach out to each other, to start to build that new majority that's going to be able to drive the agenda of change and hope that we need in South Africa. I think we need to be reaching out to each other more, to find solutions, to build bridges into the future. South Africa needs us now to come together more than ever before. And I think the time has come to put aside the petty differences and to find the groups of South Africans that are wanting to come together and to build a constructive future. South Africans that reject violence and favor dialogue. South Africans that don't believe that you make your point heard by beating people up. That, in fact, you improve your argument and you're able to articulate your particular viewpoint. Those are the South Africans we need to come together to build that new majority in South Africa, which is why I've committed our party to being its chief mission, to being the core of a new majority by 2024. The local government elections next year are a springboard towards achieving that. We want to start to bring all these South Africans together to show them that we genuinely care about them, to show that we're really making a difference. Charles Shepherd has written in to say here, what is the DA's plan to reach enough of the electorate in their respective mother tongues to win enough seats in the National Assembly? Can you say the DA is going all out to win 134 or more seats in the NA? All out, all out. Debating theatre from sidelines in Parliament is not what South Africans want, much less what they need. Charles, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the unseemly scenes we see in Parliament of people fighting each other is not great. But you'd be amazed about how much cooperation actually does go on behind the scenes of Parliament. And I can tell you that one of my most cherished roles is being able to put together these consensuses in the committees, in the hallways of Parliament, where the majority of work gets done. But let me also make this very, very clear. Because again, the commentariat, Charles, would have you believe that this party under me is always going to be comfortable with being the official opposition. I want to make it very clear to you. I do not want to be in opposition for the rest of my life. I want to be in government. I want to be a party of government at a national level, precisely because that is the only way you change. It would be completely counterproductive to say, well, I'm only ever going to fight for second place. Nothing could be further from the truth. I passionately believe that the only way you affect change is by getting into government so that you can bring your policies to bear and change people's lives, which is what we've done in the Western Cape. It's what we've done in the many, many municipalities where we've been given the opportunity to govern by the voters who have made a choice that they wanted something different. So please be under no illusion. We're going all out to win as many municipalities as we can, outright, with our own majority, because we've been able to show that when you have your own majority, you can put your delivery agenda into overdrive. But where we don't meet the mark, we'll form coalitions with like-minded parties under formal coalition agreements that set out very clearly the terms of reference of that particular coalition. Never before are we going to make, again are we going to make the mistake of going into these loose arrangements where you're living from council meeting to council meeting. I want to get as many councillors over the finish line as possible. I want as many wards in the country to have a DA public representative serving them and showing them the DA difference. So please be under no illusion. This isn't a fight for second place. This is a fight to get into government, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to really start to bring and affect the change that's required to get the country moving forward. We've already seen after 3 years under President Ramaphosa that his reform agenda is stillborn. There are people in his own party who are the enemies of growth. that don't want the reforms there because it'll undermine their own special interests and their own warped ideologies. And that is why I made a very clear call to the President to bring his reform agenda to Parliament, and we in the DA will help him get it through, because where we believe something's been done in the best interests of South Africans, we will get behind it. We are the friends of growth. We're not the enemies of growth that sit behind the President. And so I will keep repeating that challenge. If you're serious about reform, if the President's serious about the changes that are required, bring them to the floor of Parliament, and we will help him to pass that reform agenda to get us off this trajectory of low growth, high debt, high unemployment, onto a new trajectory of hope for the future of South Africa. I've got some questions here about a lot of South Africans really anxious about, are we going to go into hard lockdown again? The President's speaking tomorrow night, I believe. Everyone's very, very worried that we're going to go back into a hard lockdown. Let me be very clear that we will be doing whatever we can to resist this country going back into a hard lockdown. This hard lockdown has devastated our economy. We were in a lot of trouble before Corona even came around, but this has really killed so many businesses that are simply not going to open again. We've lost 3.5 million jobs during the course of the lockdown. This has been one of the hardest and longest lockdowns in the world. And we've seen that these lockdowns, while effective for short periods to get you ready to be able to meet the challenge, are not, in fact, effective in the long term. And that, in fact, what is the biggest killer in South Africa is poverty. And so we've got to make sure that we stop any attempts to lock down any further than we have already. It's going to kill more jobs, it's going to harm the economy going forward, and it's going to put many, many more South Africans' lives at risk than ever would have been at risk from the coronavirus. That is why we took a really strong line from week 3, when we said to the President very clearly, you cannot continue to hard lockdown South Africa. It's simply not workable or possible for vast numbers of people who live in South Africa to self-isolate, to stay indoors when you're living in a small RDP house or in an informal settlement with 8 other people sharing a shack with you. It's not possible to be able to do that hard lockdown. And that what we needed to do was have a far more scientific approach to being able to manage the virus, given the fact that it's still going to be with us for many, many more months to come. We've got to make sure that we're making common sense decisions about the future of the country. Hard lockdown is not one of them. And even organizations like the United Nations have started to encourage and say, please don't hard lockdown, particularly in poorer countries where it has such a devastating effect on the ability of families to be able to provide for themselves and their future. It deepens inequality, it deepens poverty, and it makes it even harder for those 30 million South Africans already living in poverty. And I think it was best characterized by those terrible visuals we saw in week 4 of the lockdown of that poor woman in Dobsonville, Soweto, who was arrested for selling atchar, her only means of being able to put food on the table for her family, and yet she was arrested for it. We need a common sense approach going forward. We need to make sure that we don't go into hard lockdown. This economy simply will not be able to handle another hard lockdown. And so we'll be making those points very, very clearly. But I'm also very proud of the fact that this Western Cape government under the DA, led by Alan Winde, was able to set out how important that capable state I spoke about at the beginning of this town hall is to be able to survive and help South Africans and to be on the side of the people rather than sucking all power up to enrich itself and grow itself. And that was best typified, I believe, by the fact that whilst Alan Winde's government in the Western Cape, a DA government, was building field hospitals, in Gauteng they were digging graves. While they were buying these ridiculous scooters in the Eastern Cape, here in the Western Cape, it was oxygen and PPE. And the result was there for all to see. Western Cape got many, many more people over the divide and through the health crisis than anywhere else in the country. And I'm really proud of that system. And it just shows you a capable state where power is given to the people, where the money is spent on the people, not on the politicians, saves lives and can make a difference. We need to bring that DA difference to the rest of the country going forward. What do you like to do in your spare time? Lisa Johnson asked. Well, Lisa, what is spare time? I think that should have been the first question. But obviously, I think that have a very wonderful family, and whenever I get downtime, it's spent with my family and doing activities, going to the beach, spending time with my daughters. I've got 3 beautiful daughters, Olivia, Ashley, and Caroline, who are 14, 12, and 4 years old. And they keep me very, very busy in my spare time as well. But I also enjoy reading and staying on the cutting edge of new technologies, of new ideas, and reading widely how other parts of the world are dealing with many of the complex problems that we are dealing with here in South Africa, and always being on the lookout for solutions for those. So when I do get downtime, I do make sure I make it absolutely worth the while. Sibongiseni Buthelezi asks, what is the DA's solution to race tensions that are increasingly becoming popular in South Africa? Sibongiseni, that is an absolutely excellent question. And I really believe that what South Africans need to be doing now is reaching out to each other. We're not going to solve the problems of the country by creating even wider gulfs between people based on nothing other than the color of their skin. That what we should be doing is bringing South Africans together around that common shared set of values and principles, and then building that future together. There are politicians in this country who like to separate people and to whip up tensions amongst people because that's what gives them power, because they then can pretend that they're actually on the side of the people, when in fact the only side they're on is their own side, and they only want to look at how they can profit, how they can benefit by keeping people divided. Their worst nightmare is, their dream is South Africans all retreating into the little lagers of race, color, religion, and forming these small little camps, because it's a lot easier to divide and rule them then. Their worst nightmare, the racial nationalists, is South Africans from all these different backgrounds coming together into one big camp to be able to fight for the future of the country, because it is so much more powerful and so much more effective to protect our cultural rights, our language rights, when we're in a broad camp of people who are protecting and looking out for each other's language rights, each other's cultural rights, and are fighting in a united way for all of those rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. I believe that is where the future of South Africa lies, and that's certainly where I've committed to placing the DA at the center of South African politics, to be able to form a bulwark against the radical left and the radical right that are determined to tear the country apart and to divide us as much as they can. We need to reject these policies of division and focus on policies that unite South Africans. We're an incredible nation, and there's far more that unites us than divides us. And now more than ever before, as I've said, with these difficult days that lie ahead, it's going to require the best of us to come together around those common set of values and principles, Sibongiseni, to be able to drive the difference. Well, I think that's enough for today, folks, and thank you very much for your time and also for the questions that have been coming in here. I hope to have many, many more of these engagements. I believe that you need to remember at home that you are the politician's employer. We work for you. You do not work for us. And remember that next time you see some blue light brigade trying to push you off the road. Remember, that's your employee that's doing that to you. Make sure at the next election that you sack those as politicians who treat you like you're their employees. Remember always, power has to lie with the people. It is the most powerful force. It is where change has only ever been born from. And never forget that your voice and your vote, no matter how small you may think it is, can turn into a roar or deafening thunder that can change the most difficult of situations. Let's go out there and build South Africa. I'm excited about the future, and I'm excited about building it with all of you. Thank you very much.